Hi, my name's Katie Walker. I'm a advanced EFT practitioner in Perth, and I'm joined by a friend of mine who is a chiropractor and runs a business in Mount Hawthorn called Mount Hawthorn Chiropractic. His name is Scott Campbell-Lloyd. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Katie.
And I guess the reason why we're doing this is to talk about the connection between the body, mind and soul, and how we can kind of think about managing our overall health and well-being during this time of, well, not even just during this time of COVID, overall, long term, we should be really, focused on looking after ourselves and managing our physical body and our mental and emotional state as well. So having this conversation with Scott is just to, share a few pointers and how we can actually do that. So Scott,
Indeed.
It'd be really great just to hear what you do in your practice and how that does help your patients.
Yeah, look, chiropractics, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat within chiropractic. So there's a lot of different techniques, there's a lot of different systems. So I think there's about 5,500 chiropractors in Australia, and you could go to most of those and have on some level a very, very different experience. I use a particular technique known as the Gonstead system. It's not a widely practiced technique, both here in Australia and even internationally. However, the chiropractors that do utilise the technique, we know each other very, very well. We're a very close-knit community. And here in Australia, we've been taught and heavily influenced by the guys who took over the original chiropractic practice that was set up by Dr. Gonstead in the middle of Wisconsin, America, which is the greatest hillbilly area that I've ever been to, but it was definitely an experience. As far as the system of the Gonstead system, look, I could sit here and talk about that for hours. It's going to be reasonably irrelevant for most people, and I don't take offense to that. I understand that. I think ultimately, whether it be Gonstead chiropractic or it be chiropractic as a whole, it has an underlying philosophy, an underlying principle behind it, and that's the relationship between your spine and your nerve system. We understand that the master computer, the master controller of a nerve system is the brain. So it's been well identified, movement of the spine, movement of the body, they're major stimuli to the function of the body as an overall. Mm-hmm. Not just from a pain or a postural or a movement basis, but from a bigger scale. Mm. So from a chiropractic point of view, I'm always talking about my patients or with my patients about that relationship between the spine and the nerve system. We go about then trying to identify where there may be a short circuit and a disconnect between that relationship. And obviously a lot of that then revolves around people's movements, people's posture, people's habits, people's sleep. But understanding that your nerve system is essentially the filter or the lens by which we see our entire environment, we have to appreciate that it's not only our physical stuff that affects our body, but it'll also be the chemical stuff, so the things that we eat and drink, and then also the space between our ears. So the thought processes that we have, social isolation, I think, single-handedly was the worst phrase used by the policymakers because isolation is not what a human being is supposed to be doing.
We need
We're
to be connected.
Tribal animals.
Connectivity, absolutely.
So I think and some people will pick on me for semantics here, but I think if they'd said to us spatial distancing or spatial awareness as opposed to social isolation, I think the impact on the mental health of the kids who are locked away from school and their friends through to, corporate workers not being in their office space and having that sense of camaraderie through to, grandparents not being able to see, the grandgremlins. I think all of those factors are considerations, both from a chiropractic point of view, when I meet a patient and I'm understanding where their body is at, I have to filter through most of those variables and influences. And that may take me, days, weeks, or even months in some cases to really get through those variables so that we understand why their body is in position A in response to their environment and where we want to get them to.
Absolutely.
So
in terms of the the space between their ears, as you referred to, so the thinking, the emotional component of it. You know, when I'm working with clients, sometimes there is that presenting of a physical issue, which I would always ask if they're actually being treated by an appropriate professional, and it's being managed in that respect. But through, you know, the emotional component, it can actually manifest in a physical issue. So when you are seeing your clients, you just said you're kind of having to work through those different stages. Do you typically suggest, if they're not meeting your expectations in terms of getting physically better, do you then kind of talk through the overall, you know, the food, the emotional, the mental components as well?
Look, it's certainly stuff that I am equipped well enough to be able to recognise.
Yeah.
But I'm straight up and down I'm not equipped to necessarily go about addressing. Yeah. So I do have my little black book of people that I will refer people to in those sorts of cases. I also appreciate, and it'd be much the same as yourself, is when we meet people, we're generally meeting them at their worst.
Yeah.
And when you're at that sort of point, you don't need lots of input. Otherwise, you get too many cooks in the kitchen. So I'm very careful about, right, we need to address and meet layer number one and meet that point. It's not until we get there, then we have the ability to divide and conquer potentially. And I'm very careful not to throw too much stuff at an individual too quickly.
Yeah.
I even break it down with my patients as to, we go through a fairly well-structured process by which to achieve the goals that they've got. So that's one of the questions I ask on my intake form is, you know, where their goals are and what they want to be able to achieve. And we're able to break that down into 3 simple categories. And then I'm able to make sure that either I can confirm and double check and sometimes even challenge, through to really going is, are you really sure that's what you want to achieve? Because in order to achieve that, it's going to require this.
Yeah, sure.
So
similar approach,
making sure that I understand where people are.
Yeah.
And sort of just checking in with them at a fairly regular basis to make sure I understand where they are as far as where we are along that process. And if we do get to a point where both that they are physically ready, but also then as far as resources and time and energy and thought space, if they're ready for the next layer to help their body move forward, then that's when we will approach those sorts of things and kind of pick on them and ask them and go, right, what's our priority? Is our priority to get this in order? Is our priority to get this in order? Where can we be of assistance? If we can directly help, super. If we can't, like I said, that's why I have my little black book.
Fair out, absolutely. Similar approach to EFT practitioners in terms of really understanding how their world would look different if their presenting issue wasn't there, and working out a goal that is achievable within a period of time, just so they can actually see that the difference is happening and things are actually changing for them, and they're feeling differently about whatever it is that they're actually presenting with. So I think the take home is really that connection between our body, mind, and overall health and well-being, really, isn't it? So during this time, is there one thing that you could recommend to anyone listening that they could be doing to help themselves?
Yeah, look, I think the single biggest thing that I'm always talking about with all of my patients, irrespective of where they're at as far as their health goes, is fundamentally movement is a non-negotiable that the body must meet every single day.
Sure.
And I make a big distinction in my world, the difference between exercise and movement. Exercise is amazing. Exercise is a voluntary thing. And I think most people, if anyone's exercising, 3, 4 or more times a week, I absolutely admire you. I think you're a unique individual. But that does not replace movement. And movement is a non-negotiable requirement that the body must meet each and every single day.
Yeah.
So particularly at the moment, there's, it kind of really correlates nicely with all this COVID stuff, is there's a really significant body of research coming out about the impact that vitamin D has, particularly with this infection, let alone the immune system.
Yeah, sure.
So it's really simple. It doesn't cost you anything. It's go for a decent walk for, 45 minutes. I don't care how far you walk, and just do it in the sun.
Yeah. Because I think so, being in your house as opposed to being in the office, and I appreciate that some people are going back to the office space, but even if the roles have changed and people are going to be having more time at home, just becoming more sedentary, because you don't get up to go and speak to your colleague, you don't go to the photocopy machine, you don't go to the toilet that's down the other end of the building, and you tend to be sitting more. So in terms of that body movement component, it's really, really important to be having that break and getting up and actually moving.
Look, I must admit, I probably didn't give enough credit to those movements around an office previously. I was always, someone sits in an office all day. Look, you're going to go for a walk at lunchtime. I need you to walk up and down the stairs instead of catching a lift, etc. Appreciating the fact is, walking to and from a bus station, walking to and from a coffee shop, walking to and from a lunch spot, walking to and from a meeting room, etc. It's not ideal. It's not a perfect sense of movement, but it's still movement. So it adds up, and it does contribute to that requirement that the body has.
Yeah.
And I think we're pretty blessed in Perth. Yes, we're going into winter when it'll be more than likely it's going to be colder and wetter and more disgusting. But in the end, how many days do we have like we've got today? It's cold, but God, get out there and go for a walk right now.
Totally.
I defy you to suggest to me that you won't feel better after going for a half-hour, 40-minute walk in the sun right now, as opposed to sitting in whether it be your cold living room or your cold office.
Makeshift office for some people.
Yeah.
Just being out and again, sort of taking concepts of just being grateful for being outside and, seeing beautiful things, lovely trees and birds, and just getting that different level of stimulation happening, really important.
I'm certainly one who can be very guilty of, yes, I still make sure I try and go for a decent walk every day. I probably don't stop and smell the roses as much as I should. Particularly for someone who understands it on the level that I do.
Yeah.
If you do have the opportunity to go for that walk and do it minus headphones, minus music, and actually,
full appreciation.
Hear noises, feel the wind go through your ears.
Yeah.
Take in the smells of freshly cut grass or flowers or dog poo or whatever it is that you come across in your adventures.
Yeah.
All of our senses, ideally need to be stimulated as often as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And, most of us have a very poor sense of touch nowadays. A lot of people have a very poor sense of sort of auditory positioning. We don't know where sounds come from. And equally, our sense of taste is, becoming more and more devoid as we require bigger and bigger flavors. So the more we can stimulate these things, the more you use it, the more your body's going to reinforce those patterns, whether it be on a movement level, on a thought level, on a neurological level, on a functional level. If you don't use it, you lose it very, very quickly.
I was going to say that. Don't move it. Don't lose it. Don't use it. Awesome, Scott. I think hopefully we've shared some insight to certain things that might help others. And I the fact that we are in Perth and I love what you do, and I think there's so many synergies with working as a EFT practitioner, dealing with the emotional component of what people experience. So getting that body back to the homeostasis and balance. There's a lot of connections there. So thanks.
Oh, look, anytime. And I think as you said at the very, very start, I think he's understanding that your mind and body are irrefutably connected.
Yeah.
They both feed off each other, and you might think that you have one in order and the other one can be in absolute chaos. So anything that you can do that will consider both, I think obviously is a huge step. I'm not perfect. I don't have my house in order as well as it possibly should be. I still do silly things and hurt myself. I still fall into negative traps of overanalyzing silly details and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm big enough, ugly enough, and smelly enough that I'm more aware of it than a lot of people, and I can put strategies in place by which to address them, sometimes super well effectively and other times a little bit more slowly. And I think that's it. We're not, neither you or I are suggesting, perfection based on anything. It's more, it's just going move a little step tomorrow and you'll be better than you were today.
Exactly. Love it.
Keep moving forward.
Exactly. Thanks, Scott.
Anytime.
All righty. Thank you. See ya.